Leaving a toxic relationship is never easy, and the courage it takes to walk away often goes unnoticed by the very person who needed that bravery the most. You did. When we step out of something destructive, it's not just a physical departure, it's an emotional and spiritual declaration that we are no longer willing to compromise our dignity for the comfort of someone else. Toxic relationships feed off cycles of fear, manipulation, and guilt, and breaking free from that cycle requires strength that is sometimes born from deep pain. Choosing to leave means believing in your own worth, even if at that moment you feel broken or unsure. It is an act of faith in yourself, and that faith is the seed of healing. Many people hesitate to leave toxic dynamics because they fear the unknown, and that fear feels more powerful than the suffering they are enduring. The human heart is wired to seek connection, and sometimes it clings even to harmful bonds rather than face emptiness. But when you make the decision to walk away, you are rewriting the narrative that pain is better than loneliness. You are stepping into a reality where solitude may exist, but so does possibility and hope. It takes remarkable bravery to face uncertainty rather than stay shackled to what is familiar but destructive. That bravery becomes the first building block of freedom. Recognizing that leaving is courageous also shifts how you see yourself in the story. Often, survivors of toxic relationships blame themselves for staying too long or for allowing mistreatment. But the decision to leave is proof that you chose self-preservation over self-destruction. This moment transforms the way you view your strength, because it shows that even at your most vulnerable, you still had the capacity to protect your soul. Healing begins with the acknowledgement that you are not weak for having endured, but powerful for having chosen release. It is this perspective that allows you to embrace growth rather than shame. The courage to leave is not just about walking away. It is about choosing to believe there is something better waiting for you. That belief might feel fragile at first, almost like holding onto smoke, but it is enough to keep moving. When you leave, you are telling yourself that the life you desire, one filled with respect, kindness, and peace, is possible. Even if you don't yet know what it looks like, that faith becomes the foundation of a new chapter. Every small step toward healing, from setting boundaries to reclaiming joy, builds upon the bravery that began with leaving. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Walking away from toxicity is also an act of reclaiming your voice. In many destructive relationships, your sense of self is silenced, questioned, or diminished until you forget the sound of your own truth. Leaving is like breaking through chains that muted your spirit, and though your voice may be shaky at first, it grows stronger with each declaration of freedom. Saying "enough" is a radical statement of self-love, and it echoes long after you step away. It reminds you that you are worthy of being heard, of being respected, and of living in alignment with your values. This realization becomes one of the most liberating parts of healing. In truth, courage is not recognized in grand gestures alone. It exists in the quiet decisions we make each day after we leave. It is in the choice to not answer a call from the past, the decision to speak honestly with a friend about what you endured, or the resolve to create new boundaries. Every small act of bravery reinforces the larger act of leaving. Healing unfolds when you begin to notice these victories, no matter how small, and allow them to build your confidence. What once felt impossible slowly becomes a testament to your resilience. The courage that started with leaving continues to guide you toward the freedom you deserve. Honesty is the bridge that connects us to true healing, yet it is often the hardest step to take after leaving a toxic relationship. When you have spent months or even years minimizing the pain, making excuses for someone else's behavior, or convincing yourself that things weren't as bad as they seemed, telling the truth can feel unbearable. But honesty is not about dwelling in the past or fueling resentment. It is about shining light on what was hidden in the dark. The willingness to name what happened gives you power because it ends the cycle of denial that keeps people trapped. Owning your truth is the first step toward reclaiming your story. There is a tendency to rewrite the narrative to make the person who hurt us appear better, because facing their actions head-on means confronting our own vulnerability. We tell ourselves, maybe it wasn't that bad, or maybe I overreacted, in an attempt to soften the reality. But this only prolongs the wound, because unacknowledged pain has nowhere to go. Honesty means saying, yes, it was that bad, and yes, it hurt me deeply. This level of truth-telling is not about assigning blame, but about validating your own lived experience. Without this validation, the healing process cannot truly begin. Self-compassion grows out of honesty because it allows you to see yourself not as a failure, but as a survivor. When you admit the truth of the relationship, you can also acknowledge the ways you tried, the ways you loved, and the ways you fought for peace. This honesty helps dismantle the inner critic that says you should have left sooner or never entered the relationship at all. By facing the truth with kindness, you give yourself permission to stop carrying shame for choices you made in survival mode. Self-compassion rooted in honesty becomes the foundation for rebuilding self-worth. Honesty also teaches you to separate fact from the distorted stories you may have been told about yourself. Toxic relationships often involve gaslighting, where your reality was denied until you began to question your own perception. The act of naming the truth restores clarity and steadiness to your perspective. You begin to see that the criticism, manipulation, or control you endured was not a reflection of your inadequacy, but of the other person's inability to love in a healthy way. This truth recenters your identity on something solid and unshakable, your inherent worth. Another layer of honesty is recognizing the impact the relationship had on you, even in ways you might not want to admit. It takes courage to acknowledge the scars, whether they appear as anxiety, distrust, or a loss of confidence. Many people want to rush to forgiveness or positivity without sitting in the reality of how they were affected. But true healing cannot bypass pain. It must move through it. By naming the effects openly, you allow yourself to work through them rather than carrying invisible burdens that resurface later. This process may be uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Honesty with others also plays a vital role in the journey. Speaking your truth to trusted friends, a counselor, or a support group is a way of reclaiming the voice that was silenced. When you put words to your experience, you remove the shame that thrives in secrecy. Sharing honestly does not mean you need to tell everyone your story, but it does mean creating safe spaces where your truth is held with compassion. The act of being heard and believed strengthens the part of you that knows you are not alone. It reinforces that your experience is valid and worthy of acknowledgement. Ultimately, honesty is what transforms survival into freedom. It clears away illusions and self-deception, leaving space for clarity, growth, and self-respect. When you choose honesty, you are no longer bound by the stories others imposed on you. You are living from your own truth. That truth may be painful at first, but over time it becomes liberating. It is what allows you to build a life not on denial or fear, but on authenticity and strength. Each step of honesty brings you closer to the person you were always meant to be. Boundaries are the language of self-respect, yet for many who leave toxic relationships, they can feel unfamiliar or even selfish. In toxic dynamics, your boundaries are often ignored, tested, or punished until you start believing that your needs do not matter. Healing requires rewriting that script by learning that boundaries are not about shutting people out, but about drawing clear lines that honor your worth. A boundary says, this is where I end and where you begin. It is a declaration that you will no longer abandon yourself for the comfort of another. Setting boundaries begins with knowing what you value and what you need to feel safe and respected. Without that clarity, it becomes easy to slip back into patterns of tolerating what drains your spirit. A boundary could be as simple as deciding you will not engage in conversations that demean you, or as profound as choosing to limit contact with someone who consistently undermines your peace. These choices are not acts of cruelty, they are acts of alignment with your truest self. The more you honor your boundaries, the stronger your sense of freedom becomes. In toxic relationships, boundaries are often portrayed as unreasonable demands, and this conditioning lingers even after you leave. You may find yourself second guessing whether it's okay to say no, to take space, or to demand respect, but boundaries are not about control, they are about responsibility. You are responsible for protecting your own well-being, and others are responsible for how they respond to those limits. Recognizing this distinction helps dissolve guilt and reinforces that your boundaries are valid and necessary. Enforcing boundaries can be uncomfortable, especially when people are used to you having none. At first, resistance is inevitable. Some may push back, test limits, or accuse you of being selfish. This discomfort is a sign that the boundary is working because it disrupts unhealthy patterns that kept you stuck. Each time you uphold a boundary, despite the pushback, you strengthen your ability to trust yourself. The The courage to stay firm is what transforms boundaries from fragile intentions into lived reality. Boundaries also redefine how you connect with others. Rather than pushing love away, they create the conditions where real love can grow. When you communicate your needs clearly and consistently, you invite relationships built on respect, honesty, and reciprocity. Healthy connections thrive when both people understand and honor each other's limits. Boundaries are not barriers to intimacy. They are the framework that makes intimacy safe and sustainable. They protect not only your freedom, but also the quality of your relationships. On a deeper level, boundaries are about reclaiming your agency. Toxic relationships strip you of the belief that you have the right to choose, to say no, or to walk away. Every time you set a boundary, you affirm that your life is yours to direct. This empowerment ripples into every area of your existence: work, friendships, family, and self-care. It teaches you that you are not powerless, but fully capable of shaping a life that reflects your dignity. That lesson is one of the most powerful gifts healing can bring. Living with boundaries is ultimately an act of ongoing self-love. It requires awareness, consistency, and the willingness to endure discomfort for the sake of growth. Boundaries may not erase pain from the past, but they ensure that the past does not repeat itself in the present. They are your shield against returning to cycles that once drained your spirit. By practicing them daily, you cultivate a sense of safety and freedom that becomes non-negotiable. Boundaries become not just something you set, but something you embody. Grief is an inevitable part of healing after leaving a toxic relationship, though many try to deny it because it feels confusing to mourn something that also caused so much harm. The grief does not always come from missing the person themselves, but from missing the hope you once carried, the future you imagined, or the version of yourself that tried so hard to make it work. When you allow grief its space, you acknowledge that even painful relationships carried meaning. Mourning gives your heart permission to let go of what was never meant to stay. Without this release, the pain often lingers silently beneath the surface. Grief often shows up in waves, catching you by surprise in moments you least expect. One day you may feel strong and free, and the next day a memory may trigger sorrow that feels overwhelming. These shifts are natural, and trying to suppress them only makes them louder. Allowing the emotions to flow without judgment helps you process them in a healthy way. Instead of asking, "Why am I still sad?" it becomes more compassionate to say, "I am human and grief is part of my healing." Acceptance of grief makes it easier to move forward with gentleness. There is also a particular kind of grief that comes from losing the person you thought your partner could become. Many survivors of toxic relationships stayed because they saw glimpses of potential, moments of kindness, or promises of change. Letting go of that imagined future is painful because it feels like the death of a dream. Recognizing this type of grief is important because it honors the sincerity of your hope, even if the reality did not match it. Mourning this dream does not mean you were foolish. It means you loved with hope, and now you are learning to love with wisdom. Grief also involves confronting the parts of yourself that were lost along the way. In a toxic relationship, pieces of your identity, your confidence, joy, and even your laughter may have been dimmed. When you leave, you may feel sadness for the years you spent silencing your needs or doubting your worth. This is not wasted grief, but necessary acknowledgement of what was taken. By mourning these losses, you create space to rebuild those parts of yourself with intention. Grief becomes not just about what ended, but about what you are reclaiming. It is important to understand that grief does not mean weakness. In fact, it takes tremendous strength to sit with painful emotions instead of numbing them or running from them. Many people mistake healing for constant positivity. But real healing requires the courage to face sorrow head-on. By embracing grief, you allow your heart to heal at its own pace rather than forcing it into premature closure. This process may be uncomfortable, but it is also deeply transformative. Grief is not an obstacle to healing, it is the path through which healing unfolds. Support during grief is also essential. When you share your sorrow with safe friends, family, or a counselor, you break the silence that often magnifies pain. Being witnessed in your grief validates your experience and reminds you that you are not alone. Toxic relationships thrive in isolation, but healing thrives in connection. Speaking your grief aloud allows others to hold space for you, offering comfort that helps lighten the weight. Sometimes simply hearing someone say, "I understand," is enough to remind you that your healing is possible. Over time, grief softens and transforms, leaving behind wisdom and clarity. You may never erase the pain of what happened, but grief teaches you resilience and deepens your capacity for compassion. It helps you recognize red flags more quickly and trust your intuition more deeply. Rather than chaining you to the past, grief ultimately frees you from it by releasing what no longer belongs in your future. By honoring your grief instead of resisting it, you open the door to peace. This peace allows you to carry the lessons forward without carrying the weight of sorrow forever. Connection is one of the most powerful antidotes to the isolation that toxic relationships create. When you've been made to feel unworthy, unlovable, or misunderstood, it's natural to retreat inward and distrust others. Healing requires slowly rebuilding the belief that healthy relationships do exist and that you are worthy of being part of them. Human beings are wired for belonging, and without connection, wounds often deepen instead of closing. Seeking genuine connection helps restore both faith in others and faith in yourself. Toxic dynamics often teach you to doubt your own judgment, leaving you uncertain about who to trust. That is why rebuilding connection must begin with caution, patience, and discernment. It's not about rushing into new relationships, but about creating safe spaces where honesty and respect can grow. Friends who listen without judgment, mentors who offer guidance, or communities that affirm your worth can all play a role. Slowly, these bonds help you realize that trust can be rebuilt one small step at a time. Connection also mirrors back your value in ways you may have forgotten. When you are around people who respect your boundaries, celebrate your strengths, and honor your vulnerabilities, you begin to remember that you are deserving of love and kindness. Healthy relationships act as a reflection, showing you the parts of yourself that were hidden beneath the weight of toxicity. The more you allow yourself to receive support, the more you strengthen your belief in your own worth. In this way, connection becomes both healing and empowering. It is important to recognize that connection does not mean dependency. True healing happens when relationships are built on mutual respect and reciprocity rather than control or obligation. Connection should never come at the cost of your freedom or your peace. Instead, it should expand your sense of safety and belonging. Healthy connections encourage growth, not suffocation, reminding you that love and freedom can coexist beautifully. These kinds of bonds replace the loneliness of the past with meaningful presence. One of the challenges after leaving a toxic relationship is learning to trust yourself again and choosing who to connect with. The fear of being hurt or deceived can make you hesitant to open up. But connection does not require immediate vulnerability. It can begin with small, consistent acts of openness. Sharing a little at a time, noticing how others respond, and allowing trust to build naturally creates a safe pace. Over time, this practice rebuilds both your confidence in others and your confidence in your own judgment. Connection also nurtures resilience by reminding you that you don't have to carry your healing alone. When pain feels heavy, being able to lean on someone who understands lightens the burden. Even a simple conversation, a supportive gesture, or a moment of shared laughter can restore perspective. These experiences anchor you in the truth that life is not just struggle, but also joy and companionship. Healing becomes less about isolation and more about finding strength in community. Connection transforms loneliness into belonging. The beauty of connection is that it doesn't only heal what was broken, it also opens doors to new possibilities. Every safe and supportive bond you create becomes evidence that the world holds love that is gentle, consistent, and true. These relationships remind you that you are not defined by the toxicity you left behind, but by the love you choose to welcome now. By allowing yourself to connect again, you create a foundation for a future rooted in trust, belonging, and freedom. Connection becomes not just part of healing, but part of the new life you are building. Healing is not a single moment of clarity, but a gradual process that unfolds with time, patience, and persistence. After leaving a toxic relationship, it is tempting to want instant relief, to believe that walking away should immediately erase the pain. Yet the reality is that wounds created over time require time to mend. Healing often feels like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, a rhythm that demands grace for yourself. The process is not linear, but each step still moves you closer to freedom. One of the most important aspects of healing is learning to sit with discomfort rather than running from it. Toxic relationships often condition people to avoid difficult emotions, either by numbing them or by focusing entirely on the other person. When you begin the healing journey, you are faced with feelings you once buried: grief, anger, fear, or loneliness. Allowing those emotions to surface without judgment is part of reclaiming your humanity. The ability to feel fully, even when it hurts, is a sign that you are alive and moving forward. Reflection is another vital part of the process. Looking back on what happened, not to dwell in pain but to learn from it, gives meaning to your journey. Reflection helps you identify patterns, understand what you tolerated, and recognize the lessons you want to carry forward. This practice allows you to transform wounds into wisdom rather than scars that only remind you of suffering. Each insight you gain becomes a tool for building healthier relationships and a stronger self. Through reflection, pain evolves into growth. Patience with yourself is essential, because healing often takes longer than expected. There will be days when progress feels invisible, when old memories resurface, or when you question your strength. In those moments, it is important to remember that healing is not measured by speed but by depth. The time it takes is not a sign of weakness but of the depth of the hurt you are releasing. By allowing yourself to heal at your own pace, you honor the truth of your experience instead of forcing closure. Self-care is also a cornerstone of the healing process. Toxic relationships drain energy, leaving little room for nurturing your own needs. Now, healing means intentionally pouring back into yourself through rest, creativity, and practices that bring peace. Self-care is not indulgence but restoration. It rebuilds the emotional reserves that were depleted. Whether it's journaling, exercising, meditating, or simply sitting in silence, these acts remind you that your well-being matters. They are daily rituals that strengthen your recovery. The process of healing also involves forgiving yourself. Many people carry guilt for staying too long, ignoring red flags, or losing parts of themselves in the relationship. But guilt only chains you to the past, preventing forward motion. Forgiveness of yourself acknowledges that you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. It allows you to release shame and replace it with compassion. When you forgive yourself, you reclaim the ability to move forward unburdened. Over time, healing reveals itself not through the absence of pain, but through the presence of peace. You notice it in the quiet moments when your heart feels lighter, or when you can think about the past without being consumed by it. Healing is felt in your ability to dream again, to trust again, and to open your heart without fear defining you. It is the steady shift from surviving to thriving, from carrying wounds to carrying wisdom. The process may be long, but it creates a foundation strong enough to carry you into the life you truly deserve. Reclaiming joy after leaving a toxic relationship is one of the most profound steps in the healing journey. For so long, your energy may have been consumed by conflict, confusion, and survival, leaving little room for laughter or lightness. When the weight begins to lift, there is often an emptiness that feels unfamiliar, and it can be tempting to fill it with more struggle. But reclaiming joy means giving yourself permission to feel happiness without guilt. It is about rediscovering the parts of life that remind you are alive and free. Joy often begins in small, quiet moments that might feel insignificant at first. It could be a walk in the sun, a favorite song that makes you sway, or a meal that nourishes you deeply. These moments are powerful because they reconnect you to the present, pulling you away from the shadows of the past. Toxic relationships often make joy feel dangerous or fleeting, as if it cannot be trusted. Learning to embrace these simple pleasures again rebuilds your confidence in life's goodness. Reclaiming joy also means reconnecting with your creativity and passions. Toxic relationships can strip away hobbies, dreams, or talents as you pour your energy into trying to keep peace or please someone else. Returning to the activities that once gave you meaning helps you remember who you are outside of pain. Whether it's painting, writing, dancing, or cooking, these practices reignite your sense of individuality. Every act of creativity affirms that your life belongs to you again. Joy is not only about doing, but also about being. It is found in moments of stillness when you allow yourself to breathe deeply without fear. It is in waking up without dread, in resting without guilt, in feeling safe in your own skin. These are experiences that toxic relationships often make impossible because chaos becomes the norm. By embracing peace and stillness, you show yourself that joy doesn't have to be loud. It can be quiet and steady, a constant undercurrent of freedom. Another way to reclaim joy is through relationships that uplift and nurture you. When you surround yourself with people who celebrate your growth and honor your boundaries, joy naturally multiplies. Shared laughter with a trusted friend or meaningful conversations with someone who truly listens become reminders of what connection should feel like. Unlike the draining ties of toxicity, these bonds add lightness to your life. Joy thrives in the presence of genuine, healthy connection. Reclaiming joy also requires letting go of the belief that happiness must be earned. Toxic relationships often plant the idea that you must perform, sacrifice, or prove yourself to deserve good things. Healing means rejecting that narrative and embracing joy simply because you are worthy of it. You do not have to justify laughter, pleasure, or peace. They are your birthright. Allowing yourself to receive joy without conditions is one of the most radical forms of freedom. Ultimately, joy is a form of resistance against the damage toxicity tried to inflict. Every moment of laughter, every spark of creativity, and every breath of peace is proof that you are no longer defined by pain. Joy does not erase what happened, but it transforms your story into one of resilience and renewal. It is the evidence that you have not only survived but are learning to thrive. By reclaiming joy, you open yourself to a future filled with possibility, where freedom is not just an idea but a lived reality.